You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't.
Hello, listeners. I'm Bela Musitz, host for this episode of the 15 Minutes Share Your Voice podcast, where we talk with top-notch law firms and attorneys about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing. They deliver tailor-made services to help your law firm accomplish its objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and to make sure you're getting the best return on investment, your firm needs to have better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. Today's podcast guest is attorney Keith Fuicelli with Fuicelli Lee, located in Denver, Colorado. Keith is a personal injury attorney renowned for his unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Since founding Fuicelli Lee in 2008, he has been fulfilling his lifelong aspiration of championing the rights of those in need. Specializing in traumatic brain injuries, after a harrowing experience of his own, Keith has garnered a formidable reputation for his exceptional trial skills that have resulted in multiple million-dollar awards for his clients. Welcome to the podcast, Keith.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about Fuicelli Lee.
Well, we're fairly, I would say, a mid-sized law firm in a mid-sized market here in Denver, Colorado. So we have 6 or 7 attorneys, probably 20 support staff, and run, like I said, a medium-sized docket, if you will, of cases. We really try to focus on taking cases to trial whenever we can. So we try to pride ourselves in being a true trial firm.
Yeah. Now, that sounds a little bit different than sort of the typical personal injury firm where they try to settle out of court for the most times, or am I misconstruing that?
I think a lot of firms that run really high volume try to settle out often. Other firms, if you really are looking for complete maximum value on cases, that's almost always going to take going to trial. And the reality is, in the personal injury world, I have found in order to really achieve maximum value on cases, many times you either need to go to trial or you need a realistic threat that you'll take them to trial if that's what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So from the time that I would call you, let's say I had a lasting, debilitating injury that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. From the time I call you to sort of the time we get to trial, what's that time horizon typically like?
Well, if you actually end up going to trial, I would say usually 3 to 4 years, only because you're probably looking at 2 years minimum of treatment. And then we really, before any doctors are going to say, hey, you have a permanent injury. And the permanent injuries are the real driving force for big verdicts and big settlements on cases. So in order to get there, you really need to be able to show you've sort of exhausted all medical options that are available to you. So by the time you file a lawsuit and then actually get to trial, if you've been continued, of course, COVID threw a huge wrench into everything. Yeah. Typically what we're seeing is about 4 years from the date of the crash or accident to trial.
Got it. Now, so what you just said was part of that time is this going through the process of making sure that I have a debilitating injury. So we have good evidence that says, hey, yes, indeed, we've tried everything for a couple of years now. Nothing seems to work. And my client really, really does have a serious lasting deficit here.
Sure. And hopefully that's not the case, right? I mean, hopefully you heal up, and I tell clients when they come in, you don't want to be the kind of client that walks out of here with $1 million ever. It's much better to have your health, resolve all injuries, and go on with your life. But if you do have a debilitating, lifelong, forever injury, it is critical that you've exhausted all available remedies. And what I tell clients a lot of times when they come in is what the insurance company is going to do is they are going to literally look at every single medical record that you have and look for any excuse not to pay. And an obvious excuse is, well, gee, you never followed up with this doctor, or there's some hope, or there's some magic cure. So if you're going to be going in front of a jury, actually saying this is a forever, lifelong, debilitating injury, you certainly need the evidence to back it up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that we would stay in contact throughout that 2-year process of going to see doctors and all those types of things.
Absolutely. And it's critical that sort of we are involved in helping make sure that there aren't these big gaps. Because sometimes what happens, through no fault of the clients, but they just get kind of lost in the system, right?
Yeah.
They're expecting somebody to call them to set up an appointment. Nobody ever calls. And you really, a lot of times, need to be your own best self-advocate. And if you are not pushing, saying, wait a minute, I need to have X, Y, and Z done, I need to look into this, then you get lost. And then you end up with this big gap in your treatment. And of course, the insurance company uses that as an excuse not to pay on your case.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long does a typical trial take?
Well, it depends on the complexity of the injuries, and it depends on whether or not it's a disputed liability or not. A lot of times, insurance companies are smart enough to admit liability when it's obvious, and then you're dealing with damages only. And sort of a secret on our end is we try to do it as quickly as we possibly can. So I've heard it said that the shorter the trial, the bigger the verdict. And there's lots of reasons for that. So hopefully it's 3 to 5 days. But for more complex liability fights with complex injuries, I've got a trial going next month, and we're looking at 6 days, could be 7 trial days. So that's a lot longer process than 3 to 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I can imagine that for the injured person, going through the trial can be a stressful event. It's a new event for them. They have to sort of relive things. They need to, they're in the hot seat probably for a while. So how do you help them prepare for that?
You are 100% correct. It is a very, very stressful and traumatic experience because they are having to relive it. So a lot of times what we do, for example, with brain injury cases, is as much as we can, we're going to excuse our client from the courtroom. So anytime you've got a doctor coming in talking about how bad it is, you don't want your client, the patient, the plaintiff hearing that ever. So we try to excuse people as much as we can and sort of preparing them. I think everybody thinks it's going to be worse than it is when they're cross-examined by a defense lawyer. As long as the person's telling the truth and they're nice, they can just fall back on telling the truth and being nice. So we'll do some mock testimony and just make sure that they feel comfortable with the process. But otherwise, we rely upon the truth to take us home.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So if I called you up and said, hey, I was in a car accident, my shoulder hurts, what would the process be that you go through with me to decide whether this is something worthwhile pursuing or not?
Well, first thing we have to figure out is there somebody that was responsible for what happened? So assuming that you were not at fault and assuming that there is a viable person to bring an action against, then we will, if the injuries are significant enough, we tend to be a little bit selective in the cases because there's only so much time in the day. So if it's a case where there's no damage and then we can refer those out to some of our friends that handle those lower level cases. But if it is, we can prove liability, injuries are worth the time to pursue, then we jump in and we honestly try to settle your case. It's always better. I sometimes tell clients this: if the insurance company is making you even an offer that is in the realm of reasonable, you'd be kind of crazy to turn it down and go take your chances at trial. So we sometimes say, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And it's true. The minute you are greedy or overreach, it's one of the things that jurors are on the lookout for. And let's be clear, when a plaintiff car crash person walks into court, they are the least credible person around, about on par as like a congressperson. The jurors are looking at you. They think you're faking. They think you're trumping this up. So, we want to make sure that that's not occurring because, every once in a while we get that kind of like spidey senses go up like, hey, something here is not adding up.
Yeah.
Work through to make sure we have the evidence to back up at trial, and then try to settle your case. And if we can't settle the case, then we file a lawsuit. But probably 90% of cases settle without having to even sue. And of the cases that where a lawsuit's filed, probably 90% of those settle without going to trial.
Got it. Yeah, I can imagine that, as some of us have seen on TV, trials are highly unpredictable.
Highly unpredictable. And anyone that goes to trial a lot will tell you they've won cases they should have lost, and they've lost cases they should have won. And that is so true. That's why it's that whole bird in the hand or two in the bush thing. If there is something on the table that takes away the uncertainty of trial and the stress and the trauma and everything else that goes with it, settle your case and move on.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So, since you guys are pretty specialized, are there other firms that call you and either refer a case to you, or you work together with that other firm?
For sure. Because we really are a specialized trial practice. Almost all the attorneys that work here are former prosecutors. We all have a ton of trial experience, and we go to trial a lot. Mm-hmm. So we are brought in by usually smaller firms or lawyers that don't have the expertise in trial to go try the case. So usually in those circumstances, we'll co-counsel with the other firms. And sometimes they'll just refer cases to us because it's not their area of expertise. Brain injuries are a great example because there's a steep learning curve when it comes to imaging and all the different aspects of brain injury cases. Yeah. So in those situations, we're brought in as co-counsel or trial counsel.
Yeah. So if I have an injury, what would your advice be for me to go out and find an attorney to help me, explore what the situation should be and whether this should be brought a suit against it or not?
That is a great question. What I would say to anyone who's looking to hire a personal injury attorney, you really want someone that goes to trial and succeeds, not because you want your case to go to trial, but the insurance companies keep score. They know who's going to trial and who makes them pay. So if you hire a firm that goes to trial and has good results at trial, the chances of achieving a fair settlement are exponentially higher. If, on the other hand, if it's, a new lawyer that doesn't have any success in the courtroom, well, then the insurance company might just say, well, let's go take our chances at trial. And then you might start getting pressure from that attorney to settle your case on the cheap. So I would say, look at reviews online, because it's there's, I would say, two pieces. The first is competency and the ability to go to trial and succeed. And then the second piece is customer service, which sounds like a given, but is not. So you really want a firm that has a lot of good reviews and serves their customers well. Do your homework, do your research.
Yeah, right. Like we talked earlier, for the client, it's probably an anxious time. So having a lot of touch points with the client, at least from the client's perspective, is probably important. So
for sure.
Having people who do that within your firm would be critical. So how do you guys do that? How do you keep track of that stuff?
So we are huge proponents of systems, and we have very detailed systems and touch points for both the attorneys to case managers to paralegals, everybody through the process to make sure that we are not just sort of answering client questions, but how's the client doing? Do they need a referral out?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you'll have a situation in which a treating medical provider might be reluctant to refer the person out to someone who's more specialized. And so without talking to your client and understanding what's going on with them medically, what's the current status of their treatment, they can get lost in the weeds. And then what happens is this: if you're not constantly reaching out and touching your client, the patient, then they can be, swimming along for a year and a half. And then they're like, okay, well, I want to be done with this. You submit the claim, you get this really low ball offer. And then now you got a huge problem, because if there's a huge gap in treatment, the defense lawyer gets up in front of the jury and says, well, they couldn't have been that hurt, because if they were hurt, they would have got treatment. So it's really important for so many reasons that there be constant interactions with the client, the patient throughout the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how does your firm find clients? What's your process for that?
Well, we are primarily referral based. So we sort of built the practice on just doing really good work and spreading the word. And, obviously, if you're going to run a business like this, you have to be involved in digital, you have to be involved in print and sort of grassroots marketing. And I told my law partner when we started this, it's like all things. We're going to do all things, all avenues, and all avenues work a little bit. So for us, it's just trying to farm our list of happy ex-clients, finding new clients, finding referral partners that send cases in, and most importantly, just doing good work. And if you do good work, people will find you.
Yeah. And I can imagine that within the legal profession, you develop a reputation, and within that profession, people hear about various different cases that you guys have been successful on. So that also help, again, that good work. The public may not know about it, but the people within that referring group of lawyers certainly would knows about it. And that must work really well for you guys.
Certainly on the co-counsel because we've had a lot of success at trial. So with that trial success comes people reaching out and the referrals from other lawyers that are looking to, for example, you might have a lawyer that knows they're not, ready to go take on Goliath in trial.
Right.
So those lawyers reach out, call us, we go in and either co-counsel with them, sit at counsel table with them, or, preferably from our standpoint, sometimes is let us go run with it, let us go achieve justice here.
Yeah, super. So let me ask you a question. What made you start your own firm, right? Most people go to law school, they go to work for a large firm, and they're an associate, work 90 hours a week, and they work their way up to partner. What was your path? What was your path like, and why did you start your own firm?
So that's another great question. I have always been extremely entrepreneurial my whole life, ever since I was a young kid, got out of college, started a mortgage company with a bunch of my friends. And then I worked at a really large personal injury firm where I could have done that very thing and made partner. But I always sort of had that drive that if you want something, you want to do it your way, then you have to go create it. So wrote a whole business plan and just kind of went off and running after, I had worked at the DA's office for almost 5 years. So I had a bunch of trial experience. I had the business plan. I sort of knew what it was I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And so ultimately you just have to take that Indiana Jones sort of leap of faith, if you will, and go do it. And I was always going to have questions my entire life if I just worked for somebody else. Yeah. That's just me.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Now, there's a significant number of attorneys who leave big firms and go out on their own and start a practice.
Sure.
But you did it with a partner. So talk me through that sort of process of, do I do this on my own? Do I do it with a partner?
I think there's pluses and minuses to both ways. I think the key is with your partnership is that you have to be the sum of the parts has to be greater than the individual pieces, if that's the right way to say that. And so hopefully each person brings a different quality to the partnership. And then that's what I've seen over time, because we've now had this partnership for, I think we just had our 15-year anniversary. So it's been a long time. And the partnerships that strive, each person of the partnership brings a unique value add proposition. That's the key, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You have complementary skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. So tell me what that first month was like, right? You leave the big firm where, the office gets cleaned somehow magically overnight, the garbage gets taken out, the coffee's made in the morning, all that kind of stuff. And now you're in, your own office, and man, none of that stuff happens. So what was that first month like?
Oh, it was great. We had a windowless office in an office sharing environment where we had a conference room we could use. We had a receptionist it wasn't our receptionist. It was this office share receptionist, had a conference room in a windowless office. And then the biggest concern right then is how do we get clients and, getting those clients, working the clients the right way. And, it's crazy. I look back on that with such fondness. and you sort of don't realize it when you're in the moment and you're just, how am I going to, pay rent or pay any bills? You don't think about it. And then you look back on it years later and you're like, wow, that was a pretty cool time. And now we've got 20 something employees and all these things that go along with it. It's just much different.
Yeah. Was there one action or decision that you guys made that really sort of, accelerated your growth and got you guys going and really gave a lot of comfort to you to say, hey, okay, this is going to work?
Well, it was after we already started, because I never really knew whether it was going to work or not.
Sure.
And I just sort of figured, well, if you don't try, then you'll never know. But there was a moment when I started reaching out to referral partners. We're personal injury, so we would reach out to chiropractors, physical therapists, and they were eager to help. So I was pleasantly surprised. If you ask for help, people will give it to you, even from your competitors. So you can go to some of these really big law firms. Well, they're all turning down cases. They are turning down cases that they're too busy to handle. And they're happy to have you run with those cases. And once I sort of realized that, and I thought, you know what? You just have to go put yourself out there, pound the pavement, and ask for help. And people are anxious to help you. And then sure enough, next thing you know, we were busy. And I think that a funny story was, after we settled the first case, I don't know that there was ever a month that went by that we didn't settle a case at some point. And it's been that way for 15 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's super. So if there are some law students listening to this, or some attorneys that are associates at large firms, what advice would you give them?
So for law students, and even if you're in a big firm, this is what I would say. Most lawyers I know are miserable. This is true because, and lawyers tend to get paid a lot of money because the jobs are really hard and you're billing hours. You got to work all this time, but I love my job. I love what I do. I feel like I'm always on the side of right. And so find what it is you're passionate about and pursue it, irrespective of the money. It can be the criminal side. I'm thinking of, I was a prosecutor, but people that are public defenders, they are passionate about that piece of it, or it can be animal rights, or it can be the environment. Whatever it is that you are passionate about, pursue it. And also learn by doing. So and I actually have a lot of friends that got out of law school and hung a shingle, and they are some of the most successful people that I know. So you can learn by doing. Obviously, you want mentors that walk you through the more complicated pieces of it. Make sure you have malpractice insurance. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Yeah. But then go for it. You only have this one life. You have this one chance at this profession to go do whatever it is that you want to do and to fulfill your dreams. So if you're sitting working at a big firm and you're not personally satisfied, well, this is your chance to leave and go find something that does satisfy you deep in your soul. Because then it's not work. It makes those hours that you're working, reading. I'll just give you an example. I love diving deep into the medicine on cases. So I'll be sitting at home and I'll be reading peer-reviewed medical journals on the weirdest, most obscure medical conditions, but I do it because I kind of love it. And it's like, this is cool. Yeah. And inevitably, someone is trying to tell me that what my client has is fake or not real or wasn't caused from a crash. And so I just love digging into it. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like intellectual stimulation. So my advice is go for it.
Yeah, that's really great advice about going for stuff that you enjoy. And I never thought about the law profession that way before, but you're right. There's so many different areas, right? From public defender to ACLU, to injury, to family law. There's all these aspects that you can find a passion within that broad spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned family law, because I have a lot of friends that do family law and they love it. And at first I would thought, oh my gosh, that sounds awful, but not really. It's can be really fascinating, especially if you're not doing it for the money. If you're not, I want to make as much money. Instead, I want to help these families that are going through a horrific time, or these children. And I want to do it. If your mind is in the right spot, then joy will come.
Yeah, that's super. Hey, so where can our listeners find out more about Fuicelli and Lee?
Well, we have our website is coloradoinjurylaw.com. So there's lots of information on our website, and our phone number. You can always give us a call, 303-444-4444. So we just got that new phone number, which makes us easy to find. I'm a Colorado University person. So if you're following the Deion Sanders thing, he wears a shirt that says, "I ain't hard to find." And I feel like for Fuicelli and Lee, we are not hard to find.
Very good. Very good. So, Keith, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything additional you'd like to share with our listeners before we close here?
It's an honor to get to serve other people. We are in the service business, but the fact that I somehow am a lawyer and I get to help people and I get to stand up in front of juries and fight for the side that I think is right. I can remember a just real quick story. I was trying to figure out what to do in my life. And I remember watching Law and Order when I was like in, freshman in high school or something. I was like, wait a minute. Do you mean to tell me people get paid to do this? Are you kidding me? And I was sold. So I never forget what an honor it is to do this profession and to serve people that are in need. So I'm grateful every day I get to do it. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been lovely.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. What a great way to close. That was a perfect summary. Thank you so much for being a best guest on the podcast. And I hope our paths can cross in the future sometime.
I hope so as well. Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.